For our last new idea this week, we're going to be learning our first Hebrew conjunction. You've just had a little video to remind you what a conjunction is. It's a connecting word, right? Our Hebrew conjunction for the day shows up 50,000 times in the Hebrew Bible. And just like the definite article the, which we just talked about, it's not a separate word, but it's tacked on to the beginning of another word. So if eved means servant or a servant, then we say and a servant by adding a vav and a vocal shavah. V'eved. V'eved, and a servant. Isha, woman. V'isha, and a woman. Ha-isha, the woman. V'ha-isha, and the woman. Ish, a man. V'ish, and a man. Ha-ish, the man. The ha-ish is and the man. Okay, so we add a vav to the beginning to form our first conjunction, and. Now sometimes this vav is spelled as a shurik instead of a vav with a vocal shavah. And how is that pronounced? Ooh. So this happens when it's tacked onto a word that begins with a bait, a mem, or a pay. And that's why this is sometimes called the bump rule. The bump rule. B-m-p. We'll add our dagesh there. Bump. The bump rule. Or sometimes with a word that begins with a vocal shavah. So, melech, a king, becomes and a king. U-melech. Na'arim. A youth becomes, youths. Na'arim, youths, becomes u-na'arim. Pausing there. U-na'arim. Now, why can't we just have the normal version of it, the? Well, you'd have two shavahs at the beginning of the word then. Two shavahs at the beginning of the word. And that's confusing. Which rule do you obey? The fact that the shavah at the beginning of the word is vocal, or the fact that when two shavahs go walking, the second does the talking, right? So to avoid that problem, Hebrew just naturally changes the vowel of this conjunction and we get u-na'arim. Same thing happens here. We'll see this again. So instead of saying V'Sefarim, we just change it and it becomes Usefarim. Usefarim. Another example here, Shemuel becomes Ushemuel. Ushemuel, instead of trying to have two shavahs at the beginning of the word. Okay, and the other thing to just note, and again, this is just for the purposes of recognition, is that the Bagad Kafat letters, right? So, Beit, Gimel, Dalet, Kaf, Pei, and Tav, the ones that can take a dagesh line, those guys lose their dagesh line when you add the conjunctive vav. And you don't need to memorize that, but just be aware that that's happening. And so if you see it without their dagesh line, you'll still know it's the same word. So we have ubayit, except it's going to lose. So this means and a house, right? It's going to lose that dagesh line, so it becomes uvayit. Or paro, Pharaoh. Now this is the bump rule, right? That's why these two are taking a shurik, a vav, as a shurik vowel instead of the vav and shavah. So u, but instead of uparo, it becomes ufaro. Makes it a little easier to pronounce. Again, you don't need to memorize that. I just want you to be able to recognize those nouns. So if they have a conjunction, if Bagad Kafat letters with a conjunction in front of them might lose that dagesh line. So think about the song that we were singing last week. Hine ma tov umanayim. Uma So that's the conjunction, the shurik in front of the mem. I wish I had it in front of us right here, but I'm sorry that I don't. So umanaim, instead of the manaim, we have umanaim. Hine matov umanaim. This is the bump rule. So it becomes a shurik in front of a mem. Okay. So the last thing to say is that before a reduced vowel, it takes not a shavah, because again, then you'd have this weird kind of conjunction of shavah, of reduced vowels at the beginning. But instead, it takes whatever half of the reduced vowel we have here other than the shavah. So, chalom becomes the chalom. We're hunting for the non-shavah part of this reduced vowel, and then we steal that patach and put it under here. So, chalom becomes the chalom. Anashim becomes va'anashim. Va'anashim. And emet, so sorry, this is men. So anashim, men becomes and men. Emet, truth, becomes the emet. Again, we're stealing this part of the reduced vowel, the segel. That's how we know which vowel this vav wants to take. And finally, the conjunction and can be spelled with the comets before one-syllable words or some words that have an accent on the first syllable. This is a little unusual, but you can see it. So zone, flock becomes and a flock with the comets. Vazone. Or lechem, bread, becomes valechem. Okay, so here's the deal. You can see the conjunction and spelled any of these ways. It's usually, let's see if you can see them all here, is the question. Okay, usually with a shavah, but it can be a shurik, spelled like a shurik, but before the bump letters, bait, mem, and pei. You can have, these should be reduced. Oh, excuse me. These vowels next to a reduced vowel, okay, when the word begins with the reduced vowel, you steal part of the vowel for the vav. And finally, you can have it with the comets, all in different situations. Now, what I want you to know is that all of these at the beginning of the word signify the conjunction and, okay? We're focusing on recognition. Now, the encouraging thing is there are only 6 other words in the Hebrew language that start with a vav, and together they only show up 18 times in the Hebrew Bible, whereas this conjunction vav, meaning and, shows up about 50,000 times. So when you see a word beginning with a vav in the Hebrew Bible, it's 99.9999% of the time it's going to be the conjunction and, no matter what vowel it has in it, okay? So I want you to kind of be aware of why the vowel changes, but we're going to focus on being able to recognize this in all of these forms as the conjunction and.